Hello and welcome back to Election Time News America. Today is Tuesday, June 24th, 2025, and today I'm actually going to be going over the New York City mayor election, specifically the Democratic mayoral primary election. This is a smaller scale election, obviously, but as it is a very blue city, whoever ends up winning the Democratic nomination is almost essentially immediately the favorite to win the election. And there's a bit more of complication with now independent Eric Adams, but we'll be getting all to that in a minute. Election Time News is your one stop for all things elections and politics, from summations to poll reviews and news. Subscribe below for more content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. Also, make sure to follow the Substack, which is linked on the profile. Remember, there's never a dull moment in politics. So, what we have here is the general overview of the election. So, the interesting thing here is that there's only one Republican candidate that has entered the field, Curtis Sliwa. So, there is no primary for the Republicans. This is already decided. Jim Walden is an independent. He's not on any party, so there's also not a primary there. And Eric Adams is also running as an independent. There will not be a primary there. He was essentially kicked from the Democratic Party after some cases that were charged against him, and so he has been able to stay mayor of New York City, but it is generally seen that there's not really going to be much of a chance that he's going to win. Doesn't matter who the Democratic nominee ends up being in these, the Democratic nominee is the favorite to win in all three of these polls that were done by Emerson College, and especially looking at the most recent one being at the end of May, which was, of course, a month ago, but still, it doesn't matter who it ends up being. They're well outside of the margin of error here, but there is a relatively large undecided population, which actually would likely go for the Democrats. So it's basically almost entirely the lead for the Democrat here is almost ensured. Doesn't matter who the nominee ends up being, which is why the most important race in the list here is going to be the Democratic mayoral primary, which is a relatively full field here. So to start off, we have the former New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo. We have, if we scroll down to candidate section, Adrian Adams is going to be in alphabetical order, Speaker of the New York City Council. Michael Blake, New York Assembly member for the 79th District. And then here we have the main contenders. There's really three main contenders that are fighting for this. Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, attorney general of New York, and U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. But also he has some cases against him as well. So that is definitely going to be an interesting part at play there. Brad Lander, New York City Comptroller, and also a city council member from the 39th District, and Zohran Mamdani, New York Assembly member from the 36th District. So the interesting thing, especially about recently, is Mamdani's rise in the polls. He's seen as the most left-leaning out of all of these candidates, and also with that as well, the most anti-establishment, and etc. etc. Now you also have Zelmora Myrie, New York State Senator from the 20th District, Jessica Ramos, New York State Senator from the 13th, Scott Stringer, New York City Comptroller previously, and Whitney Tilson is just an investor. There's very, very little chance that Whitney will be able to win this. Now, interestingly, we do have quite a bit going on here. So Eric Adams basically got booted from the party, and then you also had people stepping in to run this. So he also was former governor. Andrew Cuomo was, of course, forced to resign amid a sexual harassment scandal. And so that is why he resigned in the first place, and now he is running for the position of mayor of New York City. there's a group called Don't Rank Evil Andrew for Mayor, Dream for NYC, which I am pointing this out specifically because it comes in later, specifically as not to rank Eric Adams or Cuomo on their ballots. Now, ranking, this is because they have a ranked choice voting system. And so, based on that, you literally can rank the contestants by what number preference they are. And from there, you don't have to worry about any issues of having to do continual runoffs. Whoever has the least first place votes, all of their votes, every single ballot, whoever the people put as their second place for that candidate, then gets dropped off to that candidate. So if someone said that their number one choice was Cuomo and their second place was Mamdani, and Cuomo got last place, then all of those candidates, and the one that I just said, who has said number one Cuomo, number two Mamdani, all of those number two votes would go to Mamdani to increase his total. So this is a way to embrace it's seen as a way to embrace first past the post without having it does the primaries for you in a way. So what happens here is that originally Andrew Cuomo had a very strong lead. As you can see, almost 40-point lead here, but it has shrank, and now we do actually have a final round result that actually recently had Mamdani on top. So that was a very big surprise there. If we go into the polling, we do have some recent calls on the first round. We actually only have one where Mamdani is ahead, but then they do not have a final round poll. But here's the one that was very interesting that came out relatively recently that shook up a lot. There was finally a poll where in the first round Cuomo was ahead by 3, but in the final round Mamdani was ahead by 4. This is why this system is seen as beneficial, as that means that more people who put their number one vote for Brad Lander or number one vote for Adrian Adams preferred Mamdani to Cuomo. So that preference does actually go through. So now you ended up with Mamdani up by 4, which is very, very narrow, especially considering that literally every single other poll, including from Mamdani himself and Dream, which we talked about before, also had Cuomo up by 4 in the final. Every single other one did have Mamdani losing in the final average that had one. Some of them only did first choice, which is generally probably going to be easier to end up running. But this most recent one also has Cuomo up by 19 with a lot more undecideds. A lot of those from Mamdani. Most likely this pushed undecideds. That's 21. So there's still a few undecideds in this Emerson College poll. But these two are the main ones. Interestingly, what I saw is select pollsters, and of course they have their own pollster in there, even though they were one of the highest error pollsters for the 2024 cycle. But it is the New York Times themselves. So it's a bit of self-endorsement, just something I wanted to point out there. But we do have some Democratic sponsors, but that doesn't necessarily mean that much. Instead, we'd only have to see who is for which candidate, obviously. Dream is going to be anti-Cuomo. Mamdani is specifically going to be pro-Mamdani, for obvious reasons. Jewish Voters Action Network, I'm not 100% sure who they might end up benefiting the most, but all of these candidates they've been relatively strong, but we've definitely seen a downward slope in Cuomo and a strong continual growth for Mamdani, to the point where now we finally had a poll where Mamdani was ahead by 4. Typically, what happens is that the polling is actually a bit behind the public opinion. We saw this in Australia's elections, where there was a spike up in labor. And so what we ended up having was there was a slight spike up in labor at the very end of the election cycle, but the election was a blowout in the House for labor. So it's something that is somewhat comparison here. Okay, 800 likely voters. 644. All right, interesting. So 1,350. So some of these are going to be more credible than others based on how many people there were. 3,012 likely voters. So here's the final list. All of the details they had. So that's actually not undecided. It's the full field of people. And so what we do have is 1,350. This is probably most likely the closest one that we had, and Marist College does have Cuomo up by 10. This one has Cuomo up by 4. And so, again, it's going to be all down to even the fact that there was a partisan poll, but there's been a continual shift in Mamdani's direction. And we also typically end up seeing that the polls are behind on public opinion. So you want to see the polls trends more than the actual polls themselves. Because polls are a snapshot in time, and considering the fact that this was from June 18th to June 20th, this is behind current public opinion. This is definitely behind public opinion, June 11th to 22nd. So what you want to see is where is public opinion likely moving, and how long, and then also figure out, so you literally just want to do a quick simple equation. What's the slope, which is going to be how is public opinion changing per day, and then figure out how far out your end outcome is. So at this point it's very, very minimal. The election is literally later today. The polls are open right now, matter of fact, but you have to start off somewhere. So Cuomo plus 12, 10, 4, 12, 4. And Manhattan Institute's only 644 likely voters. So I think that is the least, that's actually the smallest sample size other than Expedition Strategies. So that'd be 12, 10, 4, Mamdani plus 4. Even here, you have Harris X, Cuomo plus 19. That's because there's a huge expanded field, and like basically all of these candidates, where basically everyone else had them literally getting 0 or maybe 1, they had them getting 6 or 5%. So that's definitely, I'd be interested if they did a final round to see what they'd end up seeing. But that's going to be the main question, is how far out is the final result. So with that in mind, we can also then finally, before we go to what we think is going to happen, is going to be towards the prediction markets, which aren't always on point 100%, but it's definitely not going that bad. So I'm a little interested now. I saw that earlier, but I'm curious on what happened. Why it says Grok. I'm concerned they might have gotten purchased by some companies. But anyway, we currently have Andrew Cuomo with a 55% chance of winning, according to Polymarket. Zam, Zam, wow. Zoran Mamdani with 35%. Eric Adams with 10%. This is the mayoral election by itself. So this is assuming this would be, that's the Republican candidate, and then all of these candidates are also in the Democratic field. So we do have 55 to 35, which means that we do actually have to pull out, that's going to be 90%. So it'd be 55 over 90, and then 35 over 90 would be the percent chance for the primaries, is roughly what these would be saying. So that's directly off of Polymarket. Here, we actually have explicitly the New York City mayor nominee. And basically, as I've been talking, literally, Andrew Cuomo was at 80.5% 4 days ago, 5 days ago, 6 days ago. He was actually quite a bit lower about a week ago, but right around here he was around 80%. Then he started dropping, and now he's down to, as I'm recording this, he is down to 56 to 44, and it just changed again. That is a lead of 12 percentage points. 56 to 44. All of these are less than 1%. And this is also a bit more heavy based off of the amount spent. $1 million have been spent on the Polymarket one versus $7.5 million here, which means there's also a larger sample size. So that means that this is also a bit more dependable. Also, I don't know if there is the Democratic. Don't know if there actually is a Democratic poll specifically. So there's really I thought I had the Democratic one. There we go. There, not first round. There we go. Now, as of here, Andrew Cuomo at 56%. So they are literally actually the exact same right now, 56-44. This is with $40 million spent. So that's actually an even larger field than the Calci one. But I'll have to look into what happened to Polymarket. Quite a few people have been dropping to referring it, so I'm going to have to check that. But 56% to 44%, the markets are on the exact same balance here. It actually says that $10.5 million has been spent for Andrew Cuomo, almost $10 million for Mamdani. So that's enough to run a small campaign, interestingly enough. And so even some smaller candidates down here, AOC even has $3.25 million spent. Most of that is likely for no, but this is all going to come down to how much of this momentum can be delivered through how much momentum is going to be delivered from the polls. How much polling momentum does Mamdani have on his side? So he's really going to be looking for, basically the general consensus is that he is not going to win the first round. The question is mainly going to be how much of Landers voters, how much of Adams voters is he going to get? And how strong is the don't rank Adams movement going to be? Because if don't rank Cuomo movement going to be? Because if it's strong enough, then he's not going to be getting any of those votes no matter what happens. So that leaves off that option entirely. So if he's able to run a strong enough campaign to at least get a second choice, that he could paint Cuomo as basically just the antithesis of what you would want as a mayor, which is part of what he's been doing. I've been looking at their campaigns a bit. I wasn't sure if I was going to make a video on this, but here I am. I'm honestly going to be going with that based on the momentum that we've seen. It's been slow but very continual. And the undecideds, I'm not 100%. I don't think there's actually any undecideds in any of these polls. It's been so close on quite a few of these. There's only one poll that has Mamdani up, but this momentum is very consistent. It seemed to move back a step from that to the first week of June. If it had continued from here, then Mamdani would have likely been leading in this one, but then he had 12, 12, 10, and then 12 again. But Mamdani up by 4 in this final poll, which means there does seem to be some hope that Mamdani would win. So I'm actually going to give Mamdani the slightest edge here. It's going to be maybe 55% chance of him winning. So it's going to be a bit off from the... No idea what those numbers are exactly saying, but... and it just dropped a bit. So 55% chance for Mamdani to win. If anything, it's going to be ridiculously close. And now they are slightly off from each other. So I'm going to say again that Mamdani has probably about a 55% chance of winning, which is essentially as close as you can physically get. But if I had to give any edge at all, it would be to Mamdani because he has the polling movement in his direction. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is an overall victory for the seen as the more establishment candidate for Andrew Cuomo there, but there might be enough of the wings of the party to be able to give Mamdani most likely their second place votes in order to bring him to the finish line to victory against Andrew Cuomo. So thank you all so much for watching today's video. Make sure to watch up on the results I'll be, of course, making posts about that, and I will be making a Substack post on the results once we get those out. So make sure to follow the Substack. And thank you all so much for watching today's video, and have a fantastic rest of your day.